You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I went down to Cork and Kerry at the park the other day. What day did I go down there? I want to say I went down there on Wednesday? Wednesday I went down there.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and I drive down to go put up the brand new banner that's out in front. They're the home of the podcast for fans, by fans. They're our official sponsor. I'm going to go down and change out the banner that was out there. It's old. It's outdated. I wanted something that was a little cleaner. Runs right there along the street on 33rd Street, right in front of the building, right? So I planned this out saying I don't want a day that's freezing cold. I've had the banner for like 2 weeks. It showed up right before Christmas. I don't want it freezing cold, and I don't want it raining or snowing. So I look ahead, and it's like this day here is going to be about 35, 40 degrees, and there's no precipitation. So I drive down there. I'm halfway there. It starts raining. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I love that neighborhood down there, too. I love the people down there. Okay, that's real South Side. They're all, like, watching me. Like, they're because the place isn't open yet. Like, they know I'm coming to change out the banner, right? I've already told them ahead of time. But neighbors are purposefully coming out on their porch to stretch just to see if I'm vandalizing the front of the building yet.
So they think that you're just down there messing with Cork and Kerry at the park.
Right.
You are messing with their neighborhood bar. You are messing with
who's this guy
icon.
Messing with the Cork sign and the Sox in the Basement sign? Like, that's what it was like. And I mean, seriously, some guy walked his dog by me 3 times. Every time he gave me the stink eye. Like, what is this?
And the
guy
dog is probably giving you the stink eye, too. The dog's probably looking at you like, what are you doing with that sign? And can I pee on it?
The dog was mad at me, too. I could tell.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I was concerned because they were all looking at me like, what's this guy doing on the sign? What's this guy messing around at the Cork? They're not open right now. What's this guy doing?
So wait, is this your sort of roundabout way of telling me that all advertisement for Sox in the Basement is just going to feature your face prominently to make sure that next time you have to change the banner, nobody stink eyes you?
No, that's not what it is. I got the thing up. I got it up. It looks nice. I'm happy with it. They're happy with it. Okay, it's out there. It's going to be another year. They're our proud sponsors, 33rd and Princeton. It's the place to be before, during, and after White Sox games. We're going to have a blast out there all year long. Just a great place to go. Great for families. I walk the kids in there before White Sox games all the time and sit down and get them something to eat before I have to go into the crush of the ballpark. But you'll see us out there, and I'm happy the banner's up. Then I try to go home. And I can't get on the expressway. They've got all of the Ryan blocked off, and I can't figure out why. Now, I figure out it's because the vice president was in town.
The vice president was in town, yeah.
And it's been one of those weeks, man. It's been one of those weeks. Everything I'm doing, it's like I'm rushing from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. Scott Merkin's on the program today. Like, Scott was great. I was able to fit him in between a bunch of stuff that I was doing today so we could talk about Andrew Benintendi and, Andrew Vaughn. He sat down with Scott and talked a lot about his expectations for the season, why he's had a bad month at the end of the season the last couple of years. So we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. We're going to talk with Merk, but he let me fit him in. But I was so discombobulated that right before this show, I actually texted Merk thinking I was texting you.
Oh, really?
And I actually texted I'll be 10 minutes later because Merk talked a lot.
You sent that to Merk.
So yeah, it's that kind of a day.
So this is the last time that Scott Merkin will be appearing on this program.
He thinks it's funny. He thinks it's
insulted
funny.
him.
He knows all he does is talk about Michigan. I mean, look, we're going to have all the stuff we talked about the White Sox on this show. There's 20 minutes of him yelling about Michigan not making the national championship game that I'm not using for the show. That was the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, it doesn't quite fit the White Sox aesthetic, but yeah.
And he lives under this belief that everybody's a Michigan fan. Like, right here in the bar is my Illini flag. I'm an alum of the Illini. I don't like Michigan, okay? We all have our schools. They're a rival. I know they don't think we're a rival because we never beat them in football, and but that's how I feel about them. And he talks to me like everybody's a Michigan fan. Like, I think he truly believes they're America's team. That's how he acts. So
now, having heard that, this will be the last time Scott Merkin appears on this program.
All right, here, look, before we get to him, Benintendi finally has the press conference. The White Sox are very happy to continue to remind people this is the richest contract in White Sox history, even though that should be embarrassing to them because they shouldn't be. 5 years and $75 million shouldn't be something that you're like, ooh, look at us, we're spending all this money. I mean, that's a lot of professional baseball teams go far and beyond that. But I'm glad that he's on the team.
Most of them have this offseason. In fact, a lot of teams have gone well beyond that for players that are, certainly they're superstar players, but yeah, it boggles me that they're sitting there touting that.
What did you think about the backload? Because I saw the actual contract terms, and it's like a $3 million bonus and only $8 million for this season. And that really shows the budget crunch that they're operating under, the self-imposed budget crunch that they're operating under. But then you have to backload the contract, so that's going to also tell you that when some of this money comes off the books from some of these veterans like a Yasmani Grandal and others down the line, and some of these bullpen arms that they went and got, that's not all going to be available because some of it's got to go to pay for some of the Benintendi money. So it's a big math problem over the next couple of years. He's clearly part of the plans, but for him to be part of the plans, other guys aren't going to be able to be re-signed. Okay, if you're not a core member of this team, you're probably not coming back when your year or two that's left is gone.
Well, that's okay, though, because I think we've identified a number of guys whose contracts are up that you don't necessarily want back. Grandal is not a guy you're going to want back because he's not going to be a premium catcher anymore. I mean, you could have him back, but not at his current salary by any stretch of the imagination. Leury Garcia is not a guy you're going to re-sign to a big contract. You have guys, though, that are not going to be a long-term part of this team, in part, too, because remember, there are a number of guys on this team that are also getting up there in age. I mean, frankly, Liam Hendricks is an older guy. Lance Lynn's an older guy. I mentioned Yaz. You have money in Yohan Moncada that you're really not going to – I don't think there's going to be any effort or desire to re-sign him, even if he turns around and has one good season out of the next two or, even two good seasons. I'm not sure what you're going to do with him. But there's money that's going to come off the books that I'm not worried about Andrew Benintendi's backload too much because I also do think that you factor in inflation a little bit there too, and you factor in the cost of doing business, and you factor in more money potentially being made. And again, remember, we've talked about the fact that some of this gets tied to things like media ratings. And if the Sox put on a good team and put on a good show, and people show up to the ballpark and people are watching on TV or watching on a regular basis, and they're getting good ratings, then a lot of this might be worry for nothing. It's just the fact that they're touting what is probably going to be a very league average contract for a guy of Benintendi's stature as the richest contract in White Sox history, and building up Andrew Benintendi as maybe more of a star than he really is. I think he's going to do really, really well for the Sox, but I'm not impressed with the idea that he is being crowned as like, this star piece that's really bringing everything together. I think he's a glue piece, and I think he's an important part of the team going forward the next few years. But I'm okay with the terms of the contract, and I'm glad he's here.
Joining me on the phone line right now, our good friend from MLB.com. He covers the White Sox. He's been doing it forever. He's right there, always in the middle of everything. He was sitting there when Andrew Benintendi was introduced, and had some great stuff. He's got a newsletter that he puts out regularly. If you don't subscribe to it, I suggest you do. There's all kinds of really interesting tidbits in there. And he joins us here on Sox in the Basement again. Scott Merkin. How are you, Scott?
Chris, I'm doing well. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. I think according to Larry David, today might be the last day we can say Happy New Year, right? Is it 4 days or 5 days I think you get until you can stop saying Happy New Year?
Yeah, I remember that bit, and I completely agreed with him at the time, and I still do. There's a point where it's over.
If I see someone in January I haven't seen for a while, I might say, I remember the year I turned 40, people I hadn't seen that whole year. My birthday's in March. That whole year, people I hadn't seen for a while, I'd say to them, hey, I turned 40 this year. We should go out for my birthday. I went for every free meal I could get that year, even if it was like November. I saw people in.
That's awesome.
So never give up a good thing is what I'm saying.
That's awesome. All right, so you see the press conference. Andrew Benintendi comes to the White Sox. It seemed like it took forever. Was there any I didn't catch the press conference, so you're going to tell me stuff that maybe other people know, but I'm sure there's people listening to Sox in the Basement that will know these answers already, and some will not. Andrew Benintendi, the delay in the press conference, did it have to do with his wrist? Was there a delay in actually doing the physical? Were they waiting for some reason, or was just that's when they could do it?
No, from what Rick told us, Rick Hahn was on a Zoom call Tuesday night because he was flying back from a family vacation on Wednesday, I believe, so he wasn't at the press conference. But I think it just basically was the constructs of the holidays, that when it happened, it was right before the holidays. I think Andrew was traveling, from what Rick said. The offices are closed, from the MLB offices are closed basically from, I think, that day before Christmas Eve, because Christmas Eve came on a Saturday, to this past Tuesday. So I think it was just, he didn't even come in for his physical until Tuesday, came in Tuesday night, passed it fine, and they announced it, and then the press conference passed Wednesday. So I don't think, and I didn't even put this, it's a good thing that you mentioned it, I'll throw it in my newsletter this week, that he talked about his wrist and said his wrist is absolutely fine. He's already hit, I don't remember the exact total he said, but I think it's in double digits already, how many times he's hit this offseason. So I think he's ready to go and seemed fine, when he was talking to us yesterday. No issues whatsoever.
I think the best thing that came out of the press conference, though, was the reaction to Eloy Jimenez could play a little right field now because Benintendi's covering left. And I think every White Sox fan said that's right, one or two times this year, in an emergency, because I think everybody just wants to see him DH. They heard Rick say he was a DH, and nobody wants to see him injured. They need that bat for as many games as they can get this year, right?
Absolutely. But I'll say this. He's 20? I should have looked this up before I did the podcast view, but I think he's 26. Is that right now? Maybe 25?
Yeah, he's young. I'm old. I know that.
Yeah. They're not going to make him an everyday 150-game DH at this point. Now, he will be the primary DH. There's no question about it. But I do think he will play some outfield games this year. I don't think you'll see him completely removed from the outfield. Now, is that total, 4 games in left field, 1 in right or something like that? That's possible. But, I don't think he's going to be the regular right. Matter of fact, I know he's not going to be the regular right fielder. But I do think he is not a full-time, not even a thought of being in the outfield. Now, if you have, a Benintendi who's a Gold Glove winner, Luis Robert is a Gold Glove winner, and assuming that if it's not right at the start of the season, at some point early on, is Oscar Colas, who is a center fielder who'll be playing right field, that's a damn good defensive outfield, right? So, you're not going to, let's just be honest, Eloy's not a great defensive outfielder, right? And he's a big dude, so it's led to some injuries out there. It's led to him hurting himself chasing a Sean Murphy fly ball in spring training that was 20 feet above the fence. It led him running into the wall, chasing a Grayson Griner home run against Detroit. It led him colliding with Charlie Tilson in left center on a fly ball at Kauffman Stadium. So, yes, his bat is immensely important. Some people have told me they think, if he hits full stride, he could be an offensive force like Yordan Alvarez from the right side of the plate. So, yeah, I don't see him playing 50, 60 games in the outfield. I would be surprised, very surprised, if at the end of the year you look at his Baseball Reference or MLB.com stat line and it says no games in the outfield. I do think he'll play a few out there. And I think that's all Pedro Grifol was saying yesterday, was that he's talked to him, he's explained the role, he's explained that Benintendi is a regular left fielder, he's going to play, if not every day, pretty close to every day. Keep working in the outfield because you may be needed out there and you'll probably get some time out there, but you are our DH. That's pretty much the gist of that whole thing, I think.
Scott Merkin and every guest here on Sox in the Basement is brought to you proudly by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont, shop, dine, drink, and explore, and see all they have to offer and the events that are coming up, like on the 14th, the Forge Fat Tire Bike Racing Tour. See everything they have to offer at lamontdowntown.com. Most White Sox fans, us included here on this show, we keep looking at second base. And I know that they're saying, hey, we've got internal solutions, and I feel like they have to say that, right, Scott? Because if they're sitting around saying we're going out to make a move, it hurts them when they're trying to negotiate a trade. Just like when they say Liam Hendricks isn't available, but trust me, if the right second baseman came along, they'd probably consider making the flip and making the move because he's probably one of their best trade chips. That doesn't mean you don't want him on your team, but if you really were going to go out and make something impact, he's probably what people are asking for. So how much of it is lip service to not ruin your chance in the negotiation for a trade, and how much of it is they really believe this is the team?
Well, here's the thing. I'm a little on the other side on the ruining the negotiations because, let's say just hypothetically you're doing a trade with the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays know the Sox have a vacancy or not a certainty. How about that? More than a vacancy at second base, right? So, and they know that they may be looking for another catcher too. So in that instance, I don't think they went and read a quote from Rick and said, oh, he says they're fine in second. I think teams know what's going on. There's very little surprise. Maybe if, Rick called and said player X is available and a team might be like, oh, geez, I didn't know he was, available. Okay, let's see what we can put together for him. That might be something. But I think in most part, they know what's going on. I think it's just, Rick and Kenny, when they were the kind of the spokesman of the team, have kind of different styles. Rick is a little more closer to the vest. Both really good guys, both humorous dudes, both, no baseball. But, Kenny, I still remember, we've talked about this a few times because I've always said this is the angriest the Sox. I haven't always said, I've said this this all off season. This is the angriest I've seen the Sox fan base since Sox Fest of 2004.
Funny you would mention that because that's probably why they're not having a Sox Fest this year.
I'm not. I know nothing. All I know on that is multiple reasons. I'm not guessing anything past that. But in that was the year where the Cubs almost made the World Series. The Sox had like 7 free agents, and all of them left. And Kenny and the fans kind of went back and forth. It was very entertaining, And Rick, Rick has done that too. Probably not to the. It hasn't been that heightened because there's been rebuilds and there's been some success in there. And Rick will go back at people too if they challenge him. But I think Rick likes to kind of play it a little closer to the vest. So I think Rick is just saying, honestly, this is what it is right now. And he, to his credit, he said, on that Tuesday Zoom that, we have faith in Romy, we have faith in Lenny Sosa. Leary Garcia is now going to be used as a backup across the field. And we can go with that. He said, but we don't view our roster as complete as it sits right now. I think, it doesn't necessarily have to be a trade. I don't think it has to even be a big name in terms of the big free agents. I think it could be someone that you're not even thinking of that might, I'll go back to like Jimmy Rollins in 16. Now that didn't work out ultimately, although it did serve the purpose of that he played short and, had some good moments until Tim Anderson was ready to come up and assume his role, which he's taken off and run with now as one of the team leaders at shortstop. And it could be something like that. It could be some February day or early March day where the Sox announced they signed so-and-so as, to a minor league deal. I'll give you a perfect example. How about Johnny Cueto last year? I mean, no one thought anything about it when they put him on there and everyone saw his numbers and he was hurt at the end of last year. And they're like, even I was like, okay, well, it's not a bad thing taking a flyer. And he was arguably one of the top 3 best stories on the team last year. I mean, as consistent as anyone in that rotation, but Dylan Cease, I'd say, right? So I don't think anything is done there yet, but I do think, honest to goodness, there's no BS from Rick in that they do trust Romy Gonzalez to play second. They do trust Lenny Sosa, and they have Leary who can back up all over the infield. So I think if opening day Romy Gonzalez is the starting second baseman, it would not be a surprise. I think if it's another veteran who they end up acquiring in these, 5 weeks leading up to spring training or during the 6 weeks of spring training, that would not be a surprise either. So I don't think it's games being played. I think it's just Rick stating kind of matter-of-factly, here's what's going on right now, and, nothing is set in stone. There's still a lot of time left before the first game.
All right, before I let you go, I know that you were talking to Andrew Vaughn recently. I know a lot of people are curious, what's he going to be like?
I talked to him a couple hours before the Michigan semifinal, so I kind of blame him for the loss on this one, actually.
Hey, whatever makes you feel okay, whatever gets you through it.
I think he jinxed it. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. But I mean, a lot of people are curious, what's it going to be like? Are we going to see him take another step, not only because of the fact that it's another season and he's still a young player, but he doesn't have to worry about playing out of position?
Remember when he started in the outfield in 21, it wasn't like he played the whole spring training in outfield. It wasn't like he did it in the minor leagues. He did a little bit at the alternate training site during the pandemic year. But literally, Eloy hurt himself that last week of spring training, right, going for that fly ball and left. So he basically learned it on the fly. He basically worked intensively and extensively that last week, and then there he was in the outfield to start, the season. But to his credit, he's not looking for any excuses. I asked him about, positives of last year, and he said making better contact and making harder contact consistently was something he looked at. And I said shortcomings, and he came out and said, his 2 years in the majors, he has struggled in the last, month to 6 weeks with stamina. And he, without me prompting him, said, I know people say he's playing the outfield. He said that's not the case. He said 162 games is a long time. And remember, this kid has 254 plate appearances of minor league experience before he got to the majors. So it's a pretty amazing story that he's done. I mean, he led the team in homers and RBIs last year and, was a very solid offensive presence. But that's his focus. Is he wants to be ready. He said the goal is to play 162, right? So I don't know if he'll do that, but he wants to be as strong at the end of the year as he is at the beginning. Now, I think his overall mindset, playing a position where he was drafted as, although he really hasn't played much the last 2 years, is going to help him, just not focus a little more, but maybe just subconsciously even be more at ease. But I like the fact that he said, I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying the outfield tired me out. I think he did the first year a little bit, but understandably, he never played it before. But he said he just wants to be ready to play the full year. And, he knows his big shoes to fill. I think, everyone spoke highly of Jose. It would be hard to find people who spoke higher of Jose than Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets, who I talked to a couple times down the stretch where they basically said, we'll keep working the outfield. We'll do whatever to make sure Jose comes back. It didn't happen. And Andrew Vaughn now knows he's now the next link in this unbelievably historic lineage at first base, starting in, 1990, I guess it was, with Frank Thomas, Paul Konerko to Jose, and now it's Andrew's turn. So he's ready to go. You can tell he's focused. And, he told me after the first of the year, which is now come and gone, he's going over to Camelback. He lives in Arizona to start working out there. And I think he's ready for spring training and ready to take on the new responsibility.
All right. Scott Merkin covers the White Sox very well. And you know what? I did neglect to get into the Michigan thing, and I don't have time for it, Scott, honestly. I mean, you're just going to get angry.
We're on to basketball. We're on to basketball now anyway. So there we go.
You're going to get shouty and angry and fired up and everything like that. And I want to leave this in a happy place. But I appreciate every time you jump on here. Thanks for the good information, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Anytime, Chris. Take care and Happy New Year.
Sox in the Basement listeners, do the hard work. And if you're a hardworking man or woman on the South Side, you need to be outfitted properly. And that's why you should visit Red Wing Shoes in Evergreen Park, New Lenox, and Geneva. A work boots specialty store that carries sizes from 6 to 16 and feet as wide as 4E. A 115-year-old company that came out of Red Wing, Minnesota. And one of its largest stores in the entire Midwest is in Evergreen Park, Illinois, ever since 1976. When you're on your feet, the footwear is everything. So why not get an expert fitting? They warranty, repair, and offer free conditioning with laces. And they also carry Carhartt work clothing as well. Located at 3347 West 95th Street in Evergreen Park, Illinois, at 208 East Maple Street on Route 30 in New Lenox, or at 1749 South Randall Road in Geneva. Visit them today. You work hard. You've earned it. Red Wing Shoes. If it isn't the fact he was playing outfield, but it's because for 2 seasons in a row, Andrew Vaughn is wiped the last 4 to 6 weeks. And that's a conditioning problem. You know, a little bit of that is on the player, but I also have to look at the team and say, what are they doing to make sure he stays on the field and he's ready to go and he's the same as he was, or close to at least what he was at the beginning of the year? What are they doing?
Well, and the answer is not enough. Clearly, it's a further indictment of it to talk about Andrew Vaughn not being in full season condition, and then to sit there and think about pulled muscles, to sit there and think about all the soft tissue injuries that have happened, to think about the time lost to injury on this team when it's not freak stuff, right? We're not losing the team other than Eloy jumping the wall. Okay, that he hurts himself. But the stuff where guys are losing time because they're tweaking something, because it's just they just don't seem to be stretched out. They don't seem to be in the right kind of conditioning because they're getting a cramp and pulling a muscle and playing through something, and you're not getting hit by pitches. You're not getting a collision or something like that unless you're Danny Mendick. the injury bug that has bitten the Sox does feel like a conditioning issue. And so I'm happy to hear that there's going to be at least some sort of a change or emphasis on it. But I think that also gets back to the overall thing that you've heard from Pedro, right? Where this idea that he watched a very talented White Sox team sleepwalk through games, and you didn't know when you were the Royals if you were getting a motivated White Sox team or a not motivated White Sox team, if they were going to come out hot on you and put you away, or if you were going to be able to put them away quickly.
We're talking about what we heard about that the Royals may have had the book on the White Sox of get up on them early, and you could put this team away quickly in a game and watch them kind of just like let the air out of themselves, and then it's over. And if Pedro Grifol was on that team and part of the preparation, which we keep hearing about, then he knows exactly what he's dealing with and what he needs to change. And that can only be a positive to have a guy. I mean, he had to come in there at some point. I mean, it sounds like even with Benintendi, they have the second interview and they ask him about him, and he goes, well, yes, this is who I want. And, I mean, that could be a way of saying that Rick Hahn already knew what he was getting and Pedro got on board immediately. But I would think that he fits exactly what you're trying to do, and he was in that Royals organization, and he knows him very well, and he knows how he wants to employ him. But to have a manager that's able to identify some of the problems on your team because he was preparing for them and doing the pre-series prep for one of your division rivals, one of your division foes, that is a positive. Right? That is something that we talked about when he was hired, and now we really haven't talked about him a lot because we've been focusing on additions to the team.
And conditioning as much as focus on the field is a mindset, right? And yeah, you can talk about additions to the team, and you can talk about the fact that he wanted a player that he obviously liked in Benintendi to be on the team because he knows him, he knows what he's capable of. And, I like the fact that Benintendi was sort of aware and was discussing the fact that he changed his approach in Kauffman Stadium versus what he had been doing in Boston.
It was just what we said, right? Didn't we say that? When you look at his numbers, you could tell he's adjusting for where he's playing and how the ball is playing, and that's a professional hitter. And then he sat there and he answered the question, and it just fell right in line with how we kind of broke down looking at his last couple of years.
Yeah, and again, it gets back to having a good mindset. So sitting here and even trying to talk about trades that they could make or filling second base or what do you do with Oscar Colas or any of that stuff, it's all about mindset. And that gets back to where, you could be excited about the White Sox coming out a little bit, because if they do have a better mindset coming out, if the players are held to be more accountable, if you've got guys like Benintendi who are going to sit there and say, as a professional hitter, I'm going to be a little bit of a chameleon and I'm going to do what the team needs me to do. And if that carries over to Andrew Vaughn, if that carries over, could we only hope and pray that it carries over to someone like Yohan Moncada, who then turns around and tries to make an adjustment to his game? That type of stuff is what's going to get this team over the Guardians and into the playoffs, and is going to allow them the stamina and focus and grit to be able to get further in the playoffs than just getting bombed out of Houston or bombed out of Oakland. And, and that all comes together in an important way. And it's an interesting thing just to come out of the press conference for the guy who signed the biggest contract in White Sox history that shouldn't be the biggest contract in White Sox history for very long.
Listen, the other part of our conversation with Merk, and it was addressed during that press conference because, you get Hahn in front of guys that want to ask questions. They're going to get to things other than Andrew Benintendi this week when they get a chance to talk to him, was second base. And, while you might have been disheartened, because I know my initial reaction was, why are we mentioning Larry Garcia in the same breath as Gonzalez and Sosa? But when you listen to what Merk's actually saying, he's not really in the mix to be the second baseman. He's just the bench guy. And I guess that's fine. At least we're not talking about the possibility that he has a chance to win second base. It doesn't sound like that's the mindset right now. We're looking more at the other guys, the younger guys, the talent that's down in the minor leagues. We're not really going to go back to that well again and see if Larry can figure it out. So I'm fine with that. But, if it is between Gonzalez and it is between Sosa, we recently had on James Fox from Future Sox, and that's what they do. They look at, minor league talent, and they know these guys really well. And he not only said it on our show recently, I want to say it was back midway through December, but he also did like a big Twitter string where he put a bunch of them together, like breaking down Sosa and why he thinks he should be the guy that the White Sox put there at second base. Basically saying it's a small sample size, what you saw in the majors, but every time he gets to a level, as he has a slow start, and then he gets going. And once he gets going, he's the better option over Romy Gonzalez. He'd rather see Gonzalez take over the Garcia role and move all about the infield. In the perfect world, that's what he'd want. So when you sit there and you hear, what Merk has to say, Rick Hahn still telling you, I think we can do it internally, but you never know. I mean, they might go out. If you also go off of what Merk's saying, Ed, he mentions well, what about the Jimmy Rollins or the Johnny Cueto thing? It could be like one of these under the radar things. I'm not really looking for one of those guys. I'd rather let one of the young guys go, right?
Yeah, I don't love the idea of bringing in the desiccated remains of a veteran to try and recapture his youth for one.
Andrelton Simmons comes walking in the door, right? And decides he's going to play second base.
There's a guy who's defense first, who fits kind of that. What do you do to overcome the lack of a shift kind of a thing? But see? I don't want to see the Andrelton Simmons farewell tour. I don't want to see Cesar Hernandez part 2.
Elvis Andrus, he's still out there.
I know he's still out there. And look, to the extent that somebody like Elvis Andrus comes walking in the door, and we saw what he's capable of in a small batch last year, if he comes walking in the door on a very, very team-friendly contract, okay, it's not necessarily the end of the world, but given the chance to have Lenyn Sosa prove it or Romy Gonzalez prove it, I would take that at this point. And I also think too that, to the extent that you're talking about filling 2 holes with rookies in having Oscar Colas potentially be up here as the right fielder, notwithstanding the whole, Eloy Jimenez playing right as well, and Lenyn Sosa or Romy Gonzalez to the extent that he's still kind of a rookie, even though he's had a couple of cups of coffee with the team. You can withstand that the more you feel comfortable with the veteran talent around you. And I can take Oscar Colas striking out a lot more with Andrew Benintendi in left field than I could with Gavin Sheets being the other corner outfielder. I can take Lenyn Sosa getting off to a slow start if he plays good defense, given what you need out of that position, and given the fact that, with a healthy Tim Anderson and with Andrew Vaughn motivated to get off to a good start, that you can have a good lineup around these guys and let them earn their stripes, because I'm also not convinced that Elvis Andrus is what we saw at the end of last year versus some of what he had been towards the end of his stint with the Rangers or while he was with the A's. And so, again, if you're going to have a guy hit 220 and play solid defense, would you rather it be a rookie who still can sit there and go, oh, wait, I get it now, and then all of a sudden turn into something else? Or would you rather have it Elvis Andrus, who at age 34 is sitting there going, yeah, but this is literally everything I have to put into this right now?
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.
A spectacular interception that was returned. Both were right at the TCU guys, And then fumbling the handoff at the one without even nothing having to do with the defense. They just dropped the ball. And then the stupid call by Harbaugh on 4th and 2 from the goal line on the first drive. There's 24 points right there. And you can't beat Northwestern giving away 24 points, let alone a 12-1 team,